Hello everyone, Andy here, and here's what you can look forward to in today's episode. In today's episode, Meg tells us why she's a Falcons fan,
how much do you want to bet on it,
which division rival team player she includes in her list.
Okay, so this one is a little bit controversial for a Falcons fan.
I know exactly I think I know where you're going with this. And they debate who is number one overall as the best ever free agency signing in NFL history. Hope you guys enjoy. Hello and welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast for a brand new series 5 on the show, hosted by myself, as ever, Andy Davis. And today we've got a special episode. We're doing a top 10 free agency episode where basically me and my guests I'm bringing on in a few seconds are going to go through what we feel are the best 10 free agency signings in the history of the game and trying to compile our own top 10 list in this episode. Now, before we do carry on, we want to touch on a few new features of the show, which will be hopefully be a regular feature of the show. First of all, on this day, so back in 2022, on this day, this is recording on March 6th, but going out on March the 8th. On March 8th, back in 2022, Aaron Rodgers signed a $200 million deal to remain with the Green Bay Packers to make him, at the time, the highest paid player in NFL history. And on the same day, Russell Wilson was traded to the Denver Broncos. Wilson and a 4th round pick in exchange for 2 second-round picks, a 5th round pick, quarterback Drew Lock, Shelby Harris, and Noah Fant. And today's birthdays, if you're listening and your birthday is today, you share birthdays with Kyle Allen, Hines Ward, Thomas Morstead, Kevin Zeitler, and Sean Gale. Now, today is also International Women's Day, and with me, I've got a great guest, her first time on the show, a great rising star of the UK NFL TikTok scene. With me today is Meg Orme. Meg, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
No problem at all. And it's good to have you on because you are a newbie. We are starting off our new series with a new guest on the show, and we'd like to ask all of our new guests the same question. You're a Falcons fan. So, Meg, what made you a Falcons fan?
So basically, I worked in a kind of country-themed bar, and all the guys that worked there were really into NFL and sports. Specifically, one of my best friends in the world, and we were working a late shift, and he said, "Oh, there's NFL on. We should watch a game." And I said, "Well, I've never watched one before." And he was like, "Well, you're about to learn." So we put it on, fell in love with the game straight away, and yeah, it kind of the love for it grew from there, really.
And you say you worked in a country bar. Was there not a temptation to go down the Nashville and Tennessee route, or Dallas or Texas? What was it? What was it about the Falcons that drew you to them, despite working in? It easily could have been a Tennessee Titans influence.
Well, I actually lost a bet to the same person who made me watch the game. So we joke about this over on my channel all the time, that I basically made the mistake of saying it was going to be a quiet night, and my boss, my best friend, was like, "Oh, how much do you want to bet on it?" And I was like, "No, I'm not betting on it." And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what, if it's not a quiet night, I get to pick your NFL team. If it is a quiet night, you can choose." So 5 minutes later, we were kicking someone out, and the rest is history. He's a Falcons fan, so there we go. Falcons it was. If it wasn't the Falcons, it would be the Commanders. I always say that.
Interesting. I always say if it wasn't the Dolphins, it'd be the Bears. So interesting that you have a similar sort of thing there. What year are we talking? Are we talking pre or post 28-3?
So this was only 2 seasons ago. So this was only 2023.
So you missed that part of the Falcons' history.
I'm kind of glad on that. Kind of glad on that.
Don't blame you at all. Don't blame you at all. So, as I said at the start of the show, we are going to go through our top 10 free agency signings of all time. Of course, right now is free agency period, so this is the perfect time to bring in this episode. And there's been plenty of free agency moves. We've seen more so who's going out than going in. We've not really seen too many in. The only one really that comes to mind is Joe Tooney going to the Bears from the Chiefs. But there's been a few players released from the NFL teams, like Joey Bosa, for example. Joey Bosa has Chargers. Other news: Tyler Lockett leaving the Seahawks after a long time there. Eagles re-signing Zach Bourne. Other news: the retirement of Sam Hubbard, the extension of Max Crosby, and the releasing of Christian Kirk. So plenty of comings and goings so far in the NFL season in 2025. But we're going to adopt a similar theme as we adopted when last offseason when we came on, where Scott and Brett came on for our top 10 NFL games of all time. We're basically going to reel off one by one our sort of 10 players between us that we feel are the best candidates for this top 10 list. And then we'll try and sort of amongst ourselves, try and compile a list from 10 to 1 and try and finalize our top 10 free agency signings of all time. And of course, we'll let you guys in the comments also decide on what you think is top 10, whether you think there's any players you've missed out on, and do let us know in the comments both on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and also YouTube if you're watching on here. And don't forget as well, before we do go on to the top 10 list, if you are missing DraftKings in the UK, head over to fantasygameday.app and use the code Andy5 on your first paid lineup for money back. So Meg, as you're the guest, I'll let you go first for your first candidate for our top 10 free agency signings.
Okay, so I've been reading up. I've been swatting. I'm not going to lie, and I had to start off with a Falcon. So I'm going for Michael Turner, who went from the Chargers to the Falcons in 2008, running back. So not one that necessarily gets a lot of mentions, but 1,699 rushing yards in that first season at the Falcons, 17 touchdowns. Obviously, had to be my first one that on my list.
Fair play. I mean, I actually had the luxury of meeting Michael Turner once in my life. I went to a Falcons game in Atlanta. What year is this? 2022. And I didn't see it broadcast anywhere, but I'm literally walking to my seat and there's an advertisement saying a meet and greet with Michael Turner. So literally before the game started, I went down to that part of the stadium and got a photo with him and also the Falcons mascot. So that was quite a cool experience before my time. Michael Turner, not like a Julio Jones or a Donta Freeman or anyone like that, Matt Ryan in modern day era, but a guy that I knew about. But yeah, it's cool to meet him. I wish it was a player I knew more or watched more when I was getting into NFL, but still cool to experience. And yeah, had quite the career. I mean, yeah, he's one of the sort of Falcons the best ever receivers. You could argue, obviously, we all know Julio Jones is up there as the best. I mean, there's other players I've probably forgotten about. Michael Turner is certainly one that people like to talk about. So yeah, good first selection. Now, my first choice is the most recent of my list, Saquon Barkley. I think that the impact he's had, I mean, to join in, a lot of injury problems with the Giants, and to come in and become what is, I believe, the 8th player in NFL history to run for 2,000 yards. He was a rushing leader, offensive player of the year, had an insane playoff run, and then, of course, won a Super Bowl. Even though he wasn't probably a big part of the win, I don't think defense stole the show on that day, and Jaden Hurts and maybe the receivers. But Barkley, still had a tremendous season. He's the 3rd rushing champion in history to win a Super Bowl and broke several Terrell Davis records. First of all, the fact that he broke Terrell Davis, or the last person since Terrell Davis to do that, but be the rushing champion to win a Super Bowl. But also he broke his record for the most rushing yards in any season, including the playoffs. I think personally, I feel this could be recently biased. It could be a controversial statement, but I do think this might actually genuinely be the best free agent signing of all time. I think there's only one guy I've probably got next on my list to mention. Not many players had that much of an impact straight away. Other players have had impacts, 2 or 3 years down the line. You're looking at maybe 4 or 5 years later. But for Big Barker to come in and have that much of an impact straight away, and of course a team to win the Super Bowl in a salary cap era, I think, Saquon Barkley, he may go down. Look back at it in 10 years' time, and people might view it as the best, if not certainly one of the best free agent signings of all time. Now back to you, Meg, for your second nominee for this top 10 list.
So I've got Peyton Manning from the Colts to the Broncos in 2012 as my next one. Obviously, he was MVP 2013. You say the name Peyton Manning and you rarely need to say much more, do you? He obviously went across there and absolutely schooled that season, didn't he? So yeah, he's the next one. I also had Saquon Barkley just incidentally as well. So absolutely agree on that one.
Yeah, Manning for me, it's iconic. And I think you look about the impact of free agent signing. I think if you tell any NFL fan to picture Peyton Manning in their head, I reckon 2/3 picture him in the Broncos jersey rather than the Colts. I think that as good as he was with the Colts and had a lot longer there, I think the fact that had that season where he got MVP and he had the most passing touchdowns and most passing yards in a single season. 55 touchdowns, 5 more than Tom Brady in any season, and then he had 5,477 yards, which is one clear of someone else who's also in this in my sort of nominees. I think the stat for me that I think further impacts or shows his impact on the Broncos is that before he arrived at the Broncos, they had 1 playoff appearance in 6 seasons. Since he left, they've had 1 playoff appearance in 9 seasons. So I think, and when he came in, they had, I believe every year they made the playoffs when he started, and made 2 Super Bowls, won one of them, had probably, you could argue, the greatest single season for any quarterback whilst in the Broncos jersey. I think that further defines his status as, being a top 10, probably top 5 free agent signing of all time. So Peyton Manning is such a deserving nominee. And I think the next guy I want to talk about is, I don't know how as a Falcons fan you're going to take this, because he did lead the Falcons to go to these 2 teams. Deion Sanders, back-to-back years of free agent signings. Firstly, the Falcons to the Niners in 1994 and the Niners to the Cowboys in 95, and he won Super Bowls both those seasons. And particularly, you look at the Niners season in 94, he did get Defensive Player of the Year as a result, but, he had 303 yards alone off interceptions. He had 3 touchdowns, in total from that, 6 and 12 games in total that season. And that's just in the regular season alone. He had 2 more in the playoffs in 3 playoff games. I think then the following year, you won a Super Bowl with the Niners. You go again to free agency and you go and do the same thing again. You win a Super Bowl. Not as much of an impact that season, but I think for the whole time in Dallas, he was sensational. I mean, he had a 47-yard reception on offense as well as his defensive works. Deion Sanders, 2-time, multiple position player. I think obviously Travis Hunter is the next in line to do that. And I think Deion Sanders, I think for me personally, is the best defensive back of all time. And I think the impact he made in these free agent signings is why I want to, put him in. But Meg, I don't know about you. I don't know what is the Falcons fan base's sort of views on him? Because very well liked guy, but he did leave you guys to go to, obviously he went on to win. But is there sort of, what's the feeling amongst the Falcons fans about Deion Sanders? Is he liked?
I don't think there's any real kind of like animosity as such. I don't think it's not like one of those where it's like, oh, everybody hates him. It's not something that certainly the Falcons fans that I know, which are limited, but none of them would be like, oh, can't stand him. Don't mention his name. I wouldn't say it's a massive deal. I think obviously the fact, I've actually got a couple of trading cards, Deion Sanders Falcons trading cards that I've kept in my collection. So yeah, there's no real hate there.
That's fair enough. And I think even I, as a guy that, was, when he joined the Cowboys, I was, less than 6 months old at that point. And even I, love hearing the name Deion Sanders. I've loved watching his highlights. And, a bit like yourself, I want to give a shout out to National Vintage League, who are no longer a shop. But when I bought an item off there, they gave you a little Deion Sanders. I can't think whether it wasn't a card. It was like almost like just like a small little picture. And I still have it in my room even now. And, it's something that I love to see, even though that he never really played in my era. A guy that I love to watch. And, now as a coach with the Colorado Buffaloes in college football, doing well there. I think he's certainly a guy that gathers attraction. And of course, the celebration he had, his nickname Prime Time, he had the celebration. Yeah, I think everything about him was box office. And yeah, he certainly is a guy that I think had a lot of impact in free agency. But Meg, back to you for your next selection in this list.
So my next one is Kurt Warner. So obviously there was multiple free agency signings that he did, the Rams, the Giants and the Cardinals, I believe. And then obviously that Super Bowl win with the Cardinals. But his backstory obviously is one that I think most people can attest to as being, one of the legends in NFL history. From stacking shelves to Super Bowl, unbelievable. Definitely deserves a mention there. And yeah, like I said, all three of those moves were free agency moves, weren't they? So, yeah, I would say he definitely deserves to be on our list.
Absolutely. I think the fact there's a film about his story, I think that, goes to show the impact that he has. And I think a lot of my players I've picked in my sort of nominees have all had some sort of impact. I think there's players that I wanted to talk about, but I thought about it and I thought, actually, you know what impact they have. I mean, the likes of Rich Gannon won an MVP, but didn't win a Super Bowl. And I think that there's other players who have gone on in the big games and done it. And yeah, Kurt Warner, of course, was a free agent, really. Yeah, exactly what you said, with multiple teams. And, he was part of, the Greatest Show on Turf, which is one of the more legendary, NFL teams. And you think about what he did with the Cardinals, bringing them to their, what is still their only Super Bowl appearance. And he's won so many accolades. I mean, with
and
the Cardinals,
wasn't it like 60 years between championship games when he joined as well? It was something like,
is that really the case?
Crazy,
wow.
yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, he definitely had a big impact there.
Absolutely, and he had a great career, and I think it is one of the great stories. I think Kurt Warner is a worthy selection in this list. And next up is a guy, again, we're going back to, before both our eras. I'm going for one of the first ever big free agency signing was Reggie White, going from the Eagles to the Packers back in 1993. From all accounts, when I read up on it, a bit more, it was a bit of a shock that he went to the Packers. They weren't seen as a big draw, but he comes in, and a few seasons later, they bring the Lombardi Trophy home. I mean, this guy is, sadly no longer with us, but when he was on the field, he was just a machine. And again, I wish I was maybe old enough to have been around for his sort of dominance, but for a guy to come in and sort of just kickstart the free agency, period in the NFL history, I think that he deserves to have a mention in this list, because I do feel like, he sort of kick-started the sort of what we know now, is we see a lot of big names every year make a move. So some, go back to Russell Wilson, I mentioned him earlier. Well, he's going nowhere near his top 10 list with his move to the Broncos, but he, I think that was one where it was like a big shock that he moved. And I think Reggie White was the first guy to do it, and I think he's had a big impact on the modern NFL we have today. Now back to you, Meg, for your next selection in our top 10.
Okay, so this one is a little bit controversial for a Falcons fan.
I know exactly I think I know where you're going with this.
Well, it could be one of the last two that I've saved to last, to be fair. But Tom Brady, from Pats to the Bucks. So that was 2020 that they won the Super Bowl. Now, obviously, Tom Brady is like a personal insult to Falcons fans worldwide, isn't he? We all love him, really, but we're not over it yet. So yeah, I think the fact he seemed to be, have the golden touch no matter what team he was on, really, didn't he? Patriots obviously getting that Super Bowl win, and and then obviously straight to doing the same at the Bucks as well. Can't be ignored. So, I'm not biased here. Not biased.
Not biased at all. No, I mean, Brady's one of my selections. I'm thinking about. I don't know whether he's there long enough to have him like in my sort of top 2 or 3, but certainly in the top 10, I definitely wanted to consider him, because to come in, before he came in, they, a bit similar to Manning and the Broncos, they'd not made the playoffs since I think 2008 at this point. Fresh off a James Winston season where he had 30 touchdowns, 30 interceptions, comes in first season, not only makes their first playoff appearance in years, but goes on and makes a Super Bowl, and they win it. And I think the impact he had was fantastic. I mean, the following year they could have easily, they almost had a great comeback in that division round. They could have easily gone and made the Super Bowl again, and obviously fell off the next year after that. But I think that was Father Time. But Buccaneers fans probably would take that, and me and you would both take that as fans of teams who we've not seen either of them win a Super Bowl in our lifetimes.
Yep.
Mine were my 2 were before I was alive with the Dolphins. So I would take that in a heartbeat. 2 years of excellence, then back to being just okay / good. I would take that in a heartbeat. And I think the impact he had, he came in, excuse me, he came in, did his job, and left again. So Tom Brady, greatest quarterback of all time, arguably greatest NFL player of all time, definitely deserves mention in his list. Going in free agency, going to the Buccaneers, get the job done, getting a Super Bowl. Yeah, I think absolutely he is a fair shout. Now, my next guy is the guy that I think you were alluding to. I was certainly alluding to Drew Brees. Drew Brees joined from the Chargers to the Saints back in 2006. Personal NFL idol of mine. I mean, I've made it no secret on this podcast and also on my Twitter. He was the guy that got me into the sport through watching it. My first game involving the Chargers and the Saints, ironically, in London on TV. And I remember even when I met him in New Orleans, I told him that I got onto the NFL watching you, so I had to get him in somewhere in this list. I had to bring him in, and I think not only is it like a Brady coming in and he's got the Super Bowl, which he did with the New Orleans Saints, but he became part of Saints folklore. I mean, you could argue the certainly best quarterback of all time for the Saints, one of their best players, if not the best player in team history. Almost went to the Dolphins, which is for a lot of us brings us a lot of pain. We could have easily had him and Nick Saban as a head coaching and quarterback duo. Instead, we had Dante Culpepper and God, I can't think who the head coach was at that point. But we basically had. Yeah, I think that whole Drew Brees thing does bring a lot of Dolphins fans pain because we all think it could have been us. But after the whole Hurricane Katrina situation came in when the city was having trouble, and he goes in along with Sean Payton. They win a Super Bowl against Manning 3-4 years later when the Saints beat the Colts. I think, he had to be in this list. I mean, he came in with a bit of injury problems, which is why, of course, the Dolphins didn't go out and get him. And he goes on and becomes a Hall of Famer. I think certainly first ballot Hall of Famer as well. And I mentioned before there was a guy that had 1 yard less than Peyton Manning for single season yards. That was Drew Brees. So almost became part of that folklore. 68,000, just over 68,000 yards passing as a New Orleans Saints, 491 touchdowns, 119 interceptions, 142-86 record as a starter. Of course, I said before, Super Bowl champion, Super Bowl MVP, twice Offensive Player of the Year, multiple All-Pros and Pro Bowl appearances, 7-time passing yards leader. 6 of those were all of them were with the Saints. 4-time passing touchdowns leader, 2-time passing rating leader, 6-time completion percentage leader, and of course, as you probably all expect, he is in part of the New Orleans Saints Hall of Fame. So, absolutely, Drew Brees, what a guy! I think he was robbed of a second Super Bowl appearance in 2018 season with the Rams and the no call, but what a career he had. And I think, Finn, my only real shame for him is that he didn't get to end it in front of the fans. He had to end his career with a virtually empty stadium. Didn't get that send-off that maybe he deserved, but he's had time since we've gone back and done stuff with the fans. So can't begrudge it too much, but Drew Brees is, for me, had to be in this list somewhere. But Meg, who was next on your list? But actually, this is going to be now. We're on our 9th or 10th place. This is your final nominee of our top 10.
I think that's me. To be fair, I think I've got a lot of crossovers with your ones. So if you want to add the last one, I'm good with that.
Okay. So we've got 2 more to add. Now, my top 6 have been mentioned already. My top 7 have been mentioned, actually. I had everyone I mentioned so far has been cut, but I think players I want to add to the final 2. I've got 2 right here. I want to add Charles Woodson and Shannon Sharp. Charles Woodson joined from the Raiders to the Green Bay Packers, won a Defensive Player of the Year 2009, Super Bowl champion the following season. He has actually the second most pick sixes in history, ironically behind someone who's not his dad or brother, Rod Woodson. 11 in total for him. In 100 games for the Packers, he had 38 interceptions for 568 yards and 9 pick sixes while with the Packers, 15 forced fumbles, 11.5 sacks. And I think, impact he had was fantastic. Ball in the Super Bowl. What more do you want from a free agent signing? And then the other one, Shannon Sharp, of course, you all know him from TV, but he was once a player, a tight end, joined the Ravens from the Broncos. in his first season, won a Super Bowl and set records for tight ends in receptions, yards, and touchdowns. He got 2 touchdowns in that playoff run when they won the Super Bowl in his first season when he beat the Giants. Won his 3rd Super Bowl in 4 seasons as well. The other 2 with the Broncos. So yeah, Shannon Sharp and Woodson, I think, credible introductions and nominees for this list. And I think if we're doing a top 10, I think the fact that these were the last 2 mentioned and you didn't have them, I think we'll put them maybe 10th and 9th just for that reason.
Yeah.
I think get 10th and 9th out of the way because I think, the fact that they were bottom of my list, they weren't in your list, I think that means they're probably worthwhile to be at the bottom. But
yeah,
apart from that, we're looking at the rest of our list. So if I recap the rest of our list, so myself, I included the likes of Megs, I'll go with you first. You had Michael Turner, Peyton Manning, Kurt Warner, and Tom Brady. Whereas myself, I included the likes of Deion Sanders, Saquon Barkley, Reggie White, and Drew Brees, as well as there was one more, I think. Oh, you mentioned Kurt Warner as well. So how are we going to do this? Is anyone you want to nominate for that 8th place position? Is anyone you're sort of thinking about that you think maybe should be the lowest down of our players we've mentioned?
I mean, I think Michael Turner was an honourable mention for me, so I'm happy for him to go 8th, to be fair.
Okay, so we'll put Michael Turner 8th, and we'll put Charles Woodson 9th, and we'll put Shannon Sharp 10th. So that means we got 7-1.
I think we both know who 1's going to be, and I think it's going to be interesting kind of counting down that one.
I'm intrigued what you think about this. So 7th, I don't know whether for longevity do you put Brady there because he only did it for 2 seasons, whereas other players in this list have done it for a lot longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you reckon?
But then I think there's going to be outcry on that one. I think most people would say Brady's definitely higher than number 7, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at all-time players, I think he's number 1. But for free agent signings, I don't know. I think
he didn't have as much of an impact at his signing team, I guess. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, still a lot of impact. But I think I talked about before about Manning. If you look at him and picture him in an NFL jersey, you picture a Broncos jersey. But I think NFL fans would still picture Tom Brady in a Patriots jersey.
Yeah.
So maybe put him 7. Is that what you think?
Yeah.
That's fine by me. So that means we got. I think this is the hardest one. Then the final 6.
I would argue Reggie White maybe goes in at 6.
What do you reckon? See, I put him a bit higher. The one I was thinking of was maybe Kurt Warner, but then he's got a film named after him. So
to be fair, it was between those 2 on my list that I was thinking. So Kurt Warner, if we both.
Okay, should we compromise? We'll put Kurt Warner at 6. Was it 6? Yeah, 6. And maybe put Reggie White at 5th.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm happy with that. I think it's going to get probably more heated as the list goes up. I think. It's going to be interesting to see who you have at this 4-1. So that means our 4 we got remaining are Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Saquon Barkley, and I'm missing one more, aren't I? Who be Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Saquon Barkley, and who are we missing here?
It was one of yours because I've got these. They're the only ones left on my list.
Sharp, Woods, Turner, Brady, Warner, White, Manning, Brees, Barkley. Have I missed someone out here? Have we done 9 rather than 10? Am I? No, I must. Oh, Deion Sanders. That was it. Deion Sanders.
That's the one.
So Barkley, Sanders, Manning, and Brees. Now, I think that's really tough. Because how do you pick between those 4? They're all such amazing NFL players and such amazing stories.
And I think this is the thing, right? So we were just saying that obviously Tom Brady only had 1 season at the Bucs, or like his longevity there. Saquon Barkley has only been an Eagle for 1 season. So initially my thought was he was going to be our number 1. But actually, if we're going to go play by the rules that we've already set ourselves, does he then have to go next?
Yeah, because I think the impact he's had has been amazing. But then you think about the impact Manning and Brees and Sanders had. I think you could argue they're just as big an impact. So, yeah.
And is it because it's so fresh for us watching Barkley last season? Is it, obviously we can all, no matter what, and maybe except the Cowboys, no matter what franchise you support, you're going to say Barkley had a phenomenal season and you're going to, back him. But just going on the same, if we're judging everyone on the same levels, then Tom Brady and him are kind of on par then.
You know what? I think you've sold me there. I'm happy to put him fourth because you think about it as well, like he's had this problem before in his career. Obviously nowadays, he's with a team that isn't just using him as a bell cow, better offensive line. He may be fine, but he may get an injury tomorrow and be out for the whole season. You never know. And then he could come back and not be the same player. So yeah, I'm happy with that. Put him fourth, which means Deion Sanders, Manning, and Breeze. Now, I want to. Is there a player you think shouldn't be three? Because I got a player in my mind that I don't think should be number three. It should be higher than three, but I have him one or two. Is there a player you can think of like that?
I would say Drew Brees deserves more than a third pick.
Okay,
which I know as a Falcons fan is controversial.
Well, there we are then. So my guy in my head was going to be Deion Sanders. Maybe put Manning third for that reason. So put Mason Manning third, which means we are now stuck between Drew Brees and Sanders. And that, ironically, this wasn't planned. The graphic I've done for this podcast features both Drew Brees and Deion Sanders. So it's kind of that we've managed to them two as the final two. Drew Brees or Deion Sanders.
I mean, one thing I will say is we both had Drew Brees on our list.
Good point. I like that. That's actually a good way of doing it. That's fine by me. I like Drew Brees. I'm very happy with him to number one. So I think we got it. I think we have come to quite an amicable conclusion. We've got Deion Sanders number two, and we've got Drew Brees number one. And there we are. That is our top.
And as a Falcon, I'm never living that one down, am I?
It's a good point. Yeah, you've got a state number one and a Falcon number two. I mean, who do you a former Falcon number two. Who do Falcons fans hate more? Bucks, Panthers, or Saints?
The Saints. The Saints are hands down.
Yeah,
the Aints. There's like I did a bit of a mini series on rivalries between the divisions, and the Saints and the Falcons is historic, but nobody really can get to the root of it other than that we're very close, as in geographically close. And so the fan turnout at both games, no matter which, if it's at Caesars or Mercedes-Benz, there's a lot of fans there. But yeah, the Saints are the most, the biggest rivals for us Falcons.
Interesting. Yeah, I can remember I was in I mentioned it before on the show, but as when I was in New Orleans, there was a bar or like a restaurant. Can't think which one it was, but basically it said most Mike Evans are welcome, which I quite liked.
Brilliant.
But I think it's interesting. Like it seems like there's quite a consensus there for you. But I think for the Dolphins fans, I think it definitely does. I think alter between Jets, Patriots, and Bills. I think there's some fans, who are very anti-Patriots, and there's some fans like myself who probably dislike the Bills the most. But then there's also the Jets who seem like they're the annoying little brother you've got. I think it seems like that NFC South is a lot more for you Falcons fans, a lot more of a consensus pick as to who is the most disliked team, the biggest rivalry in your fan base. So there we are. Our top 10 is final. So go from 10 to 1. Number 10 is Shannon Sharpe for his move from the Broncos to the Ravens back in 2000. Number 9 is Charles Woodson, who moved from the Raiders to the Packers. Number 8 is Michael Turner's free agency move. Number 7 is Tom Brady. Number 6 is Kurt Warner. Number 5 is Reggie White. Number 4, Saquon Barkley. Number 3, Peyton Manning. Number 2, Deion Sanders. And finally, our pick for our best ever free agency signing is Drew Brees. So there we are. That is the end of our first episode back on the new series. So thank you all for, first of all, coming back. Thank you all we had a month hiatus, which we normally do after the Super Bowl ends. So thank you all for returning and hope you enjoyed the start of this new series. And first of all, as well, thank you, Meg, for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
No problem at all. It was great having you on for your first show. We'll definitely have you on again during the season. For those of you who aren't aware of your work, how can they find you on socials?
So over on TikTok, it's at ballers_Meg, and the same on Instagram as well. That's my biggest platforms at the minute. Mostly TikTok. I'm usually on live, talking nonsense, talking football or basketball across there. So yeah.
Yeah, I saw your TikTok. I think it was today. You're a Celtics fan as well.
Yeah, big NBA fan. Learning hockey and baseball at the minute with the help of my lovely TikTok followers. So it's ever expanding. It's ever expanding, Andy.
And of course, you spent the Super Bowl with one of our friends of the show, Aaron Fletcher. It looked a great evening. Did Fletch behave himself? Did he behave well on the night?
Well, so funnily enough, my other half is a country singer, and he was performing there, and they all got a bit giddy after the kind of set that he performed, and they got an American football out inside the bar, and they just started lobbing it across the place, and Fletch was of course the one who hit the spotlight, on the ceiling as they're mucking around, messing around with some of the Coyotes staff who were great and getting involved and stuff as well. But yeah, it was all good fun. Nobody died, which is always what I say is a successful night, right?
Couldn't agree more. But yeah, that is the end of our show. So yeah, that is our free agency special with myself and our guest today, Meg. And don't forget to give her a follow if you haven't already. In the meantime, see you guys next time.